The police lights hit my living room wall at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't scared. I knew exactly what I'd done. I knew every single night I'd spent doing it, and I knew what they were going to find when they walked around to my backyard. What I didn't know was that my neighbor Linda had been watching me for 3 months, writing things down, timing me, waiting for the right moment to make that call. I opened the door. Officer Daniels looked at me, then past me. Then he went completely quiet. Within 20 minutes, there were 11 people standing on my front lawn, neighbors I'd never properly met, people who'd lived 30 feet from me for 2 years and never once waved hello. And every single one of them was crying. This is what really happened on Elm Grove Drive, and it started long before that night. Before I take you back to the beginning, if this story moves you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. These stories only reach people when you help carry them. All right, let's go back to where this all started. I moved to Elm Grove Drive 2 years before any of this happened. It wasn't a fancy neighborhood. It was the kind of street where the houses were a little tired, paint peeling at the edges, lawns that were more dandelion than grass. But it was mine, my first house, and I was proud of it. The neighbors kept to themselves. A few head nods at the mailbox, that was about it. There was Linda, 3 houses down, retired. She had the neatest lawn on the block and a habit of standing at her front window with a cup of tea, watching things. I didn't think much of it at the time. Old habits, I figured. And then there was Mr. Harold Briggs, 81 years old. The house directly to my left. White siding, one dead flower bed, and a rusted wind chime that barely moved even when the wind blew hard. I noticed Harold the first week, not because he introduced himself, he didn't. I noticed him because at 6 in the morning he would sit in a lawn chair on his porch with a cup of coffee, and he'd just sit there, staring at something only he could see. The first time I waved, he looked right through me. I thought he was just unfriendly. I had no idea what I was actually looking at. A man who hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in over 14 months. I learned that later. I learned a lot of things later. But the moment everything changed wasn't a conversation, it was a grocery bag. It was a Saturday. I was pulling out of the grocery store parking lot when I saw Harold. He had 4 bags and he was moving slow, the kind of slow that tells you a person is hurting somewhere they don't talk about. One of the bags split at the bottom, canned beans, a box of crackers, a single apple, just rolling away across the pavement. Harold didn't chase them. He just stopped, and he looked at those rolling cans with this expression I've never forgotten. It wasn't frustration, it was just exhaustion, like that was the last straw in a very, very long stack. I parked. I helped him pick everything up. I offered to drive him home. It turned out he'd taken the bus. He was quiet the whole ride. When we pulled up to his house, he said 2 words, "Thank you, son," and he went inside. I sat in my car for a minute. Then I went inside my own house, made dinner, watched TV, but I couldn't stop thinking about those cans rolling across the parking lot and the way he just stood there. 3 days later, I knocked on his door with a pot of chili I'd made too much of. He opened the door a crack, looked at the pot, looked at me. "I don't take charity," he said. "It's not charity," I said. "I just genuinely cannot eat this much chili, and I hate throwing food away." Long pause. He took the pot. That was the beginning, and neither of us knew it yet. Over the next few weeks, I started to understand just how alone Harold Briggs really was. Harold's wife, Ruth, had passed away 16 months before I moved on to Elm Grove. They'd been married for 53 years. His son lived in another state and called maybe once a month. There were no grandkids nearby, no friends dropping in, no church group, no book club, no anyone. I found this out slowly, in pieces, the way you learn things about a person who's been alone so long they've forgotten how to hand information over. One evening I came by to return his pot. I'd gotten into the habit of returning it with something inside, and he left the door open a little longer than usual. I caught a glimpse of his kitchen, one chair at a table that had clearly been built for four, a single plate in the drying rack. I'm not ashamed to say I drove home and sat in my driveway and didn't go inside for a while. There is a kind of loneliness that leaves marks on a house. Harold's house was covered in them. His gutters were overflowing. The porch step was cracked, a trip hazard for someone his age. The storm door was hanging off one hinge. These were things that take two hands and a ladder, things that were now beyond him. So I started fixing them. Not all at once, not in a way that made him feel like a project. I'd come by on a weekend morning, say I needed to borrow something, and while I was there, I'd just take care of one thing, one small thing at a time. He never said much, but he started leaving the porch light on when he knew I was coming. That was his version of a welcome mat. What I didn't realize was that Linda, 3 houses down, had started keeping track, notes in a little book, dates, times, how long my truck was parked in front of his house. She'd decided something was wrong, and she wasn't going to let it go. She wasn't the only one watching. She just was the first one to act. Harold fell in December. Not badly. He caught himself on the counter, but it shook him. He called me from the kitchen floor at 3 in the morning, not because he was badly hurt, but because he didn't know who else to call. I was there in 4 minutes flat. We sat in his kitchen until 5 a.m. He told me about Ruth, about meeting her at a dance when he was 19, about the way she used to hum while she cooked. He talked about her like she'd stepped out to the garden and might come back any minute. I started giving him my number as his first call, for anything. Middle of the night, didn't matter. The calls came. Not often, but they came. A strange sound in the house, a bill he didn't understand, once just because he'd seen something on television that reminded him of something and had no one to tell. The thing nobody tells you about being there for someone like that is how much it changes you, too. Harold wasn't a burden. Harold was teaching me something about what a human life actually looks like when you strip everything away and look at what's left, what you hope is left. By spring, we had a rhythm. Twice a week, I'd come by. Sometimes I'd fix something. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch. He started pointing out birds by name. I didn't even know there were that many kinds. But Linda had seen me coming and going in the dark. She'd seen my truck in his driveway before sunrise. She'd seen me carrying things in and out. And in her mind, without any conversation, without one single question asked, she had built an entirely different story about what was happening to Harold Briggs. And on the last Tuesday of September, she picked up the phone.
I'd been at Harold's that evening helping him sort through a box of paperwork that had been sitting in his spare room since Ruth passed. Old utility accounts, insurance documents, things that pile up when there's no one to help you tackle them. I was on my way out. It was just past 11 when the patrol car rolled up. Officer Daniels, young guy, calm. He said there'd been a concern called in about the elderly resident at this address. Someone reporting suspicious activity, a man going in and out at odd hours, staying late, possibly taking advantage of a vulnerable senior. I felt something cold move through my chest. Not guilt, something closer to disbelief. I said, "Sir, I live next door. Harold is my friend. I'd like you to meet him." Officer Daniels hesitated. That's protocol. You don't take the word of the person being reported. He knocked on Harold's door himself. We stood there in silence. The door opened. Harold looked at the officer. Then he looked at me. He must have understood immediately what was happening, because he straightened up, this 81-year-old man in his slippers, and he said, in a voice steadier than I'd ever heard from him, "Officer, that young man there is the only reason I've made it through this past year. I'd ask you to treat him accordingly." Officer Daniels didn't write anything in his notebook. He just stood there. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Yes, sir." That's when I noticed the street. 11 people standing in their yards in the dark, drawn out by the lights and the quiet. Linda was there, her teacup still in her hand. I don't know what she expected to see. I don't think she'd thought that far ahead. What happened next, none of us planned it. It just unfolded, the way true things do.
Harold started explaining without anyone asking him to. He told the street about the grocery store parking lot, about the chili, about the gutters and the porch step and the 3 a.m. phone calls. He said it without any drama. He said it the way old people say things, like they've lived long enough not to dress things up. He just said, "I was invisible, and then I wasn't. This boy made sure of that." Linda put her teacup down on her porch railing, and then she walked over to Harold and she said, "Harold, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know." He took her hand. He said, "I know you didn't, Linda. Nobody did. That was the problem." That night on Elm Grove Drive, 11 strangers learned each other's names for the first time. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that. In 2 years, I hadn't learned a single name beyond Harold's, and now here we all were, in pajamas under a streetlight, introducing ourselves. The guy across the street, Tom, said he'd been wanting to organize a block cookout for 2 years, but assumed nobody would come. A young couple at the end of the block had a newborn and were exhausted and hadn't eaten a real home-cooked meal in weeks. The woman next to Harold said she worked overnight shifts and hadn't had anyone to watch her dog during the day for months. All of it just sitting there on both sides of every door, waiting for someone to ask. We stood there for over an hour. Nobody wanted to go in. We started a group chat that night. We had a cookout 3 weeks later. Tom organized it. 41 people showed up to a street that 6 months earlier couldn't pick each other out of a lineup. Harold came. He brought potato salad. He said it was Ruth's recipe, and he hadn't made it since she passed. He ran out within 20 minutes. He was laughing. I hadn't heard him laugh before that day. It sounded a little rusty, like something that needed the dust knocked off it. Linda and I talked for a long time at that cookout. I won't pretend it wasn't awkward, but I think we both understood that she hadn't called the cops to be cruel. She'd called because she was paying attention. She'd just been missing context. There's a version of that instinct that's actually good. It just needed to be a conversation first, not a police report. We're okay. She brings Harold biscuits on Sunday mornings now. He looks forward to it all week. Harold is 82 now. He still sits on that porch every morning. But now there's usually someone who stops to sit with him for a little while. Tom, Linda, the young couple with the baby, who isn't really a baby anymore. The wind chime got a new string. He said Ruth bought it on their honeymoon in North Carolina. He wanted to hear it properly again. I think about what would have happened if Linda had knocked on my door instead of called the police, or if I'd introduced myself to Harold that first week instead of watching him from my porch. One small choice, repeated over and over, becomes the shape of your life. We live behind walls we've built so carefully we don't even see them anymore. And sometimes it takes something embarrassing or scary or completely absurd, like a police car rolling up to your neighbor's house at 11 p.m. to knock a hole in one of those walls. Loneliness is the thing we're all swimming in, and none of us are talking about it. The officer, Officer Daniels, came to the cookout. Tom invited him. He stood there in plain clothes, eating a burger and talking to Harold about birds for 45 minutes. He's been back twice since. A street of strangers, One old man, one torn grocery bag in a parking lot, and a neighbor who thought she saw something wrong and accidentally showed us how much we'd been getting wrong all along. That's the story of Elm Grove Drive. And if you live somewhere with people you don't know, a street, a building, an apartment floor, I hope it means something to you. Sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can do is just stay, show up, return the pot with something warm inside it. You never know what one simple act of kindness is holding up. If this story stayed with you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.